Hey, it's Paul. So a lot of people ask me, how do I even get started with Ionic in the first place? I do a lot of Ionic videos and most of them assume that you already know something about it or you've already got your system set up correctly. This video is for people that have never used Ionic before and are looking to download the command line interface so they can get started in creating some Ionic applications. To start with, ensure that you've got Node.js installed. Head over to nodejs.org if you're on Windows, and if you're on a Mac, use Homebrew. So Homebrew is a package manager for Mac OS, and it makes getting different packages such as Node super easy. It also means you don't have to install Node by using something called sudo, and that means we have to use admin permissions for Node and can cause a whole host of issues with dependencies, security, and much more. So make sure you download Homebrew by running this command in your console, and when you've done that, we can use brew install node. So run brew install node. And like I said, on Windows, make sure you've downloaded the current version of Node and installed that. After which, on Mac, like I said, if you've run brew install node, we should be ready to go. We can then install Ionic and Cordova. So you can think of Ionic as the UI layer for your mobile application. It provides us with loads of components such as navbars, cards, buttons, all that is styled depending on the platform the user uses on your application. So if you've got an Android device, it'll look like a material design, iOS will look like iOS human interface guidelines, Windows Phone will look like Windows Phone, and so on. Cordova, on the other hand, is what we use to build our packages to an APK for Android, IPA for iOS, and the other file types for those specific platforms. We can also gain access to things like the camera, SMS, and a variety of other native features with Cordova plugins. Let's install them using the npm package manager that we just installed with Node via Brew and via Node.js, depending on your platform. We can interact with Node in the command line by running npm, and that's the package manager for Node. So all these different packages like Ionic, Cordova, Angular, all run on something called npm. So by using npm, we can install packages such as Ionic and Cordova globally on our system. We can do that by running the -g command after the package name. So we could do this twice and run npm install Ionic-g and then npm install Cordova-g, but we can put them together to install them both at the same time. So the -g installs these packages globally on your system and allows us to execute the executables inside of the command line path. Otherwise, we would have to navigate to a particular folder all the time to talk to the binaries of Ionic, Cordova, and the variety of other packages that we'll be using. So once we've run that, we should be able to have access to the Ionic command line interface. Type Ionic inside of your command line when that's done, and you should gain access to a variety of commands. You can see here we have a variety of tasks. We also have the -h or help for more information on particular tasks. If we see the Ionic starts a new Ionic project in the specified path. So if we cd into our repos directory or whatever folder that you want to use, we can make a new Ionic project running Ionic start. And that will run it in this path, but you can also define a path if you want to. Now, after that, we need a name for the project. So my project name is the name for our project, you can call whatever you want, and then we can use something called a template. Now a template is a variety of different starter projects that we can use on the Ionic CLI. So we could start with the tabs template, and that is, as expected, a template with some tabs at the bottom of the screen. We also can use the side menu template, which has a side menu. There's different ones such as blank, which are also completely blank and just a navbar at the top. I like to use that one and then sort of bootstrap the different things that I want throughout my application. I suggest you play with them all and you'll be able to gain an understanding of how everything works by doing that. So at the moment I'm going to run a Ionic start my project name blank, and then we're going to use --v2. At this level of the CLI, we have to add --v2 to make an Ionic 2 or Ionic 3 project. If we didn't add the --v2, it would make an Ionic 1 project in AngularJS. So let's run that command. As you can see, it's creating an Ionic app based on the blank template. It's pulling the starter apps from GitHub and installing the npm packages for that starter package. It might take a little while to install the npm packages, but once that's finished, we can cd, which is change directory, into that directory. So let's cd into my project name. We can then run our project on a variety of different platforms. Some of these are emulator, the browser, and directly on the phone itself. For now, I'm going to run Ionic serve, and if we look up at the serve at the top here, we can see that it starts a local development server for app development or testing. So let's run Ionic serve. We're then greeted with the Ionic blank template inside of our browser. I like to right click and then click inspect, and at the bottom left of our console here, click the little device toolbar. This will make your application appear as if it's on a mobile device. It'll make the screen size the appropriate screen size for the device that you've selected, and also change the theme. So at the moment we're using the Galaxy S5 as an example. I can click this drop down and then select iPhone 6 Plus. If I then refresh the page, it'll then look like an iOS application. The same can be done for Windows. If I select a Microsoft Lumia 950 and refresh again, it looks like a Windows application. This is one of the powers of Ionic. The user interface can contextually change depending on the platform that your application is running on. Now I've got some videos on how you can actually take this much further by using the Ionic platform service, as well as theming it for specific platforms if you want to use the same platform across all platforms. This means you could use material design across iOS and Windows Phone, but I suggest just using the platform-specific user interfaces. For now, let's quickly take a look at the code inside of our project. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code for this, and I'm going to run code dot. This is essentially going to open up the project inside of Visual Studio Code. So let's take a look at the different folder structures of an Ionic 3 application. We start off with the hooks folder. Now the hooks folder means we can add specific scripts to the build time of our application using Cordova. As you can see, we can hook into different stages of the lifecycle, such as after build, after compile, after emulate, after adding a platform, and before all of these events, and much more. The Cordova hooks are usually advanced functionality, and you might not even have to touch them in your entire life of being an Ionic developer. It really depends on the use case of your application and what you want to do at build time, before build time, and a variety of other things. Some examples for Cordova hooks: before build, you could increment the version number of your application, and a variety of other things. If we move on to the Node modules folder, we can see we have a variety of different dependencies inside of our project. Some ones that stand out are Angular, Ionic, Ionic Native, and much more. This just represents the dependencies in our project, and anytime we run npm install, the dependencies that we install, for example Ionic, Angular, and so on, all get added to the Node modules folder. Next, we have a platforms folder. Now platforms can be iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and many more. We can add them by using Cordova, and we installed Cordova not long ago. Some example usage of adding a platform would be using Ionic platform add and then the name of the platform. Now I already have the Android SDK installed, so when I run Ionic platform add Android, this will add the Android platform to our project. Setting up the Android SDK can take a long time because not only is it a big SDK, but it also requires some configuration inside your system environment variables. Now I would advise installing it yet again using brew if you are a Mac user. So you can just type brew install Android-SDK. And inside of a Windows machine, I would advise going to the Android Studio website, downloading everything and installing all the dependencies. I do have many more guides around the Android SDK and setting it up in your Ionic projects on the way, so stick around and make sure you subscribe to see more information on that one. But as you can see, the Android was then added to our platforms folder. Next we have the plugins. So plugins are different Cordova plugins that we can add to our Ionic application. So for example, we can see the keyboard, splash screen, status bar, and more. So this represents the keyboard plugin, so we can interface with the keyboard on the phone, the status bar of the Android device, the splash screen of the application, and much more. So we can add new plugins to our Ionic projects by running Ionic plugin add and then the name of the plugin. We'd also need to add the Ionic native wrapper for that plugin, and I have a variety of guides on how to do this with plugins like SMS, the camera, the flashlight, and much more. Next, we can take a look at the resources directory. So the resources directory represents the icon and splash screen of our application. If we click icon, we can see this is the current icon and the splash screen of our app. We can generate these within the Ionic CLI. So if we look inside Android icon, we can see we have everything from the smallest definition to the highest definition icon, as well as splash screens and much more. Instead of making all these sizes yourself, you can instead run Ionic resources, and providing you've got the icon and splash screen inside of your resources directory, that'll automatically generate the appropriate sizes. Next, we'll look at the source directory. So the source directory contains all of the source code for our application. If we click app, we have our main app module inside of Angular here. We have the different pages that are associated with the application, for example, home. And we have stuff like the theme, which we can change the colors, and assets, such as icons and much more. These concepts have been explored further in past videos, and they'll also be explored in future videos too. Finally, we have the www folder, and this represents the build of our application. So we write everything inside of TypeScript. That gets then transpiled to JavaScript, and tools like Webpack help us with this. So if we look in our build folder, we can see main.js. Now, this is what gets executed in the browser after everything's been transpiled down to standard JavaScript, and you couldn't possibly write this or read this, but essentially what it is, it's the result of the transpilation of our TypeScript and the variety of other build steps to make our application run. Let's say we're happy with our project and we want to build it for production. We could head over to our command line and use the Ionic CLI to build our project in production mode. So Ionic build, and if we want to build for Android, we could use Ionic build Android, and then we can pass the --prod flag. This lets you a maximum performance of your application and ensure that all files are minified when we build for production. You've now made an application, you've built it for production, and then somebody says, I want to change the name of the app. How do we do that? Well, inside of our config.xml, we can change the name here under the name key and change that to, for example, my cool project. We can also change the description, so a description of the project, the author, and a variety of other metadata. All this stuff here about allowing intents, preferences, and plugins is really important, and we'll investigate that in future videos. The bundle name of your application here can also be changed to match what you put on the app stores. So if you're deploying this to the app store and you're asked for a bundle ID, this is the bundle ID that you need to change and match up on the store. The package.json will determine all the different dependencies inside your app, and when we run npm install and then a package name, so if we ran npm install at angular/http, the Angular HTTP would be installed to node modules, but it wouldn't be committed to our package.json unless we included the --save inside of our terminal when we're installing the package. Something to keep in mind. We can end this video by heading over to source, pages, and inside of our home.html, we can change the text of our home page to say, my first application, and the title of our page can be my application or whatever the title you want to add. And if we save this, you can see it builds automatically in the browser. And then ta-da, we get the my application, the title of the navbar, and inside that we get our paragraph, which is my first application. I hope you found this quickfire introduction to Ionic 3 very useful, and if you have, hit that subscribe button because there's many more videos on the way, and until that time, I'll see you in the next video.